Hopefully, Colson Montgomery reaches superstar status in his career, but I'm hoping he reaches an even loftier status that not many White Sox players reach.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, I'm going to get to the White Sox questions. I would love to see the Pope actually get asked. After I tackle this week's fan poll Friday, discussing your votes regarding what Shane Smith needs to improve on and who to pursue in free agency and right field and at first base. But first, let's discuss if it's possible for Colson Montgomery to reach icon status in the city and in the majors. And today's episode is brought to you by Fandom. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets used across the app. Download the app today. All right, so now the hope is Colson Montgomery's 21 home runs in 71 games is a preview of better things to come. You know, us White Sox fans, I think the last couple of seasons have conditioned us to almost embrace for the worst, whether it's them eventually getting traded away or basically them just not living up to the promise. And actually, you can go back, probably 2 decades. I mean, think about it. Gordon Beckham, he was supposed to be the stud, the dude, and he showed it in some brief glimpses, but then amounted to a bust. Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada, they showed promise, and then they end up not living up to the hype. So obviously, I am hoping like heck Colson Montgomery continues his march forward towards being a star, an all-star, and then a superstar, because I think there's 3, separate levels to that, and then maybe, just maybe, icon. And especially after that Arizona reset he had, again, when the team pulled him from minor league action, had him go down to the Glendale facility, their spring training facility, work on some things. And he started playing better at AAA, and then he got the call up, and then boom, 21 home runs in his first 71 games. But remember, he did have a lot of his struggles at the plate at AAA. And there are still questions. Will he be a good defensive shortstop? I mean, was this an anomaly that we saw the strong defense? Is he going to still have to go to third base, which I still think will happen, not because of his defense, but because this year's first-round pick, Billy Carlson, will eventually force him to third base. And, it feels like there's this dread that, it's not going to happen because it didn't happen basically 3-4 years ago with a lot of these guys. We only got 2021 when we were promised basically right now we should be celebrating another World Series is how it felt like. And it just didn't happen. But let's live in the positive for a moment. And that means a world where Colson Montgomery continues his ascension up the stardom ladder. And obviously the floor would be make the all, in the stardom ladder, make the all-star teams, be that White Sox representative, be one of the many representatives, crush 30 to 45 home runs a year, be the face of the next competitive team. But what about the ceiling of stardom? Baseball icon, maybe someday getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but maybe we should allow ourselves to dream with caution. Maybe he could be a city, at least an icon within Chicago, something that not many White Sox players achieve. And shout out to Sylvie of ESPN 1000's Waddle and Sylvie show for being the inspiration behind this segment. When he tweeted this, and I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. This is at Waddle and Sylvie. Interesting topic from at Tyler Aki. If we're drafting Chicago athletes 25 years or younger, who is the top 3 picks? In no order: PCA, Horton, Montgomery, Modest, Bedard, Nazar, Caleb, Brome, etc. Send me your 3 and why. Well, for me, if I were just focusing on the White Sox, my top 3 picks under 25 would be Colson, Kyle Teal, and I believe Shane Smith is still under 25 or at 25. But those would be my guys. If Shane's a little bit older, I don't have it off the top of my head, it would be Edgar Carroll. However, I was thinking, man, it has been a few years where you could include a White Sox player among young players poised to be stars in the city. I mean, think about it. Last year, I remember the Score had a graphic, And even though they are the flagship station of the Cubs, they still give, the White Sox coverage and that type of stuff. They had that graphic where I think it was Caleb, Modest. I forgot I think it was PCA they had on there. They even had somebody from like they had Angel Reese from the Sky. I mean, they had they had Bedard. They just didn't have any White Sox players. And I was thinking, well, there is none. I mean, Luis Robert Jr. had a terrible season last year in 2024. There was nobody that you're like, hey, I'm excited about this. And now you got a guy that could be a star among the young stars that could eventually own this city. And I do think Colson's power potential gives him the chance to be a city icon. If he's ripping 30 to 45 home runs a season, he's racking up all-star appearances, he's competing for MVPs, basically reaching his Corey Seager-like ceiling, and that was in the scouting report. Go check it out. I'm not making it up. He could have a chance to reach that icon status. Now, for those about you to jump into the comments or the scrutiny or the cynicism, yes, everything is earned for the White Sox in terms of scrutiny and cynicism. And you're definitely going to probably jump in the comments and say, well, it won't happen because Jerry won't pay him to stay beyond his ARB years. Remember, Jerry won't be the owner for much longer. It's only, the soonest he's out, obviously, is 2029, but that's still time to potentially, if Colson is living up to his potential that he's shown in the first 71 games, that's enough time to still give him an extension when Justin Ishbia takes over. And for those pointing out, well, the city has a Cubs bias. Well, Frank Thomas achieved it. Paul Konerko achieved it. Mark Burley achieved it. And that's the level of play you want Colson Montgomery to achieve. They're going to need someone to reach that Frank Thomas, Paul Konerko type level if this thing is going to work, because that was one of the things that happened to last decade's rebuild was they didn't have that guy really achieve that superstar status that was sustainable. Obviously, Jose Abreu was there, but he was getting older. And they let him walk away because they thought Andrew Vaughn could reach that, and he couldn't. Just like Eloy couldn't. And Luis Robert Jr. only had 1 year, couldn't sustain it. Moncada showed he could do it, but couldn't stay healthy. It was basically injuries, regression, or underachieving that led to it. Tim Anderson, he's the only player recently that at least came very close to that. If he kept winning batting titles and hashtag changing the game, I think he would have probably he'd be an icon. But injuries and personal issues derailed that. So you can see that Montgomery has he's got to navigate a very fine line. He's got to avoid the injuries, the regression, or the stagnation. And he also has to go beyond what Jose Abreu did. Because Jose Abreu won the MVP. And trust me, I love Jose Abreu. But he didn't win much while he was here. Now, granted, he didn't have much around him. But he's got to be able, Colson's got to be able to spur the next, era of winning baseball like Frank Thomas and Paul Konerko did to reach, I think, that icon status. That means he's got to be the reason the White Sox start winning again, a big reason why. While Thomas was one of the best hitters of the 1990s, I think one of the things that helped elevate him, was winning 2 MVPs while the White Sox were winning. Paul Konerko's heroics in the 2005 World Series helped make up for his lack of MVP status within baseball. Now, I do think Colson's got to diversify his hitting profile. Because think about this, 31 of his 61 hits in the 71 game, extra base hits that he had in the 71 games, because he had, let me rephrase, 31 of his 61 hits in 71 games went for extra base hits. Of those, only 10 were not home runs. So over 162 game season, not everything, that he's going to hit hard is going to go over the fence. However, you were starting to get a glimpse of him showing that he could diversify his hit profile with 3 doubles over his final 5 games. So if he takes certain pitches that he isn't able to put over the fence, but pound enough to get hits, I think he's got a shot. But the key is this 71 game sample can't be the best it is for him. He must climb up the stardom ladder with producing elite production. Well, it's Fan Poll Friday. Since I didn't get to it last Friday, let's go over 2 weeks worth of fan polls that shows what you think the White Sox should do at first base and in right, along with the biggest improvement Shane Smith has to make. And that's coming up after the break. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. And if you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And I love how simple of a concept Prize Picks is. Pretty much, if I think a player is going to have a great game, I can pick the more option on the player projection. If I think a player is going to stink, I can just go with the less option. And the new stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more or less on, say, Steph Curry's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. All right, so since I had SouthsideSox.com's Hannah Filippo on the show last Friday, I did not get to a fan poll Friday. So I'll go over the 2 polls I ran last week, and then I'm going to go over the one I ran this week on the YouTube channel page at Locked On White Sox. So again, make sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications. So I agree with all 3 of the top vote getters because the top pick for first base, the one that you want signing, maybe could also help out in right field. So in terms of which free agent first baseman should the White Sox target of the options, and I got it up for those watching on YouTube. Ryan O'Hearn got 46% of the vote. Rice Hoskins, 23%. Josh Bell and Carlos Santana both got 16%. And again, O'Hearn would be my choice. He's going to be a little bit more expensive than I think the other 3, but he can also play some right field as well. And it's another left-handed bat, and we all know how much Will Venable loves his left-handed bats. So I think that he would help pretty much cover 2 positions, and you could still have maybe that righty-lefty platoon actually at first base with Miguel Vargas. You could still maybe rotate in Lenine Sosa, Mike Tauchman. Maybe you can take down his at-bats a little bit to keep his legs fresh, because the thing is, though, you guys actually want Mike Tauchman back, and trust me, I would love him back too. And this is what the vote was for, which potential right field options for the White Sox interest you the most. And it was Mike Tauchman at 48%, Lane Thomas 23%, Austin Hayes 20%, and Austin Slater 9%. And again, I would love for Tauchman to be back, but I don't know if it's going to be in a starter's role. I mean, the first thing is you got to remember the whole thing was it was supposed to be Slater and Tauchman platooning in right. But Tauchman actually in spring training, and then when he came back and got healthy, actually impressed Will Venable enough to basically be like, well, I don't need a platoon in left. I don't need the lefty right-handed bat, the right-handed Austin Slater to face against lefties because Tauchman's hitting lefties. But the issue you're going to run into this season, as we saw as the season went on, is can Tauchman hold up? Can his legs hold up? Because they couldn't. This past season, he was only able to play 93 games. And the other thing is he was only able to put the ball over the fence 8 times despite having a pretty solid slug. I mean, he's going to give you a professional at bat. He's going to draw his walks. He's going to be able to be that 750 OPS type hitter. But as you saw, I mean, he's more of a utility guy, maybe. And again, I'm not opposed. I do think you should bring him back. If his ARB figure is around 2.5 to even 3.5 million, I think that's money well spent for a veteran to continue to be your clubhouse leader and, cover time until Braden Montgomery's ready. Even though they've got him also playing some center in the minors, I just think Braden Montgomery profiles better to right field. you just want to have that veteran guy there. But I don't know if Tauchman should be the everyday guy. I wouldn't mind, Lane Thomas. I think that's probably a more realistic option, or Austin Slater. I don't think Austin Hayes, even though I know I threw him out there on a past episode, might be an option. I don't think the White Sox are going to crack open the wall that much for him. But Lane Thomas, and I know that there's still the splits types issues, but I think they just got to be looking at, is Tauchman more of a utility guy, and are they going to pay him? Because on the flip side, they only paid, I believe, Austin Slater and Michael A. Taylor a combined total of $3.5 million. So maybe they want to diversify their money. I just think, bringing back Tauchman, even in a utility role, would be good for the organization. Then for Shane Smith, completely agree. The biggest improvement he must make is building up that endurance. 70% of you thought the improvement that he needs to reach and to get A status is building up the stamina for a full season, being able to get through one. 19% is throw the curve or slider more. 8% is improving in the advanced stats area, and 4% said something else. And I think you guys are all spot on, the voters that voted in this, in terms of, if he doesn't tire out in mid-June, I mean, maybe he's got better numbers than he had. But obviously, he had never thrown over 100 innings in his life. And he reached pretty much his career innings limit by mid-June. So you could tell he was gassed. I mean, the stuff wasn't as spectacular or as nasty as it was in April and May when he got past that June 10th start against Houston. So I think if he can just build up that stamina, build up that endurance, be able to handle a much bigger workload. And I think that you're the White Sox, you definitely want him to be able to eat more than about the 134 innings. I know I did the episode yesterday. But you want him to be able to get to 160, 180 innings. Because again, right now, the White Sox, they need some guys to eat up innings. And you obviously want it of the quality variety too. But they definitely need some guys to get through their starts, because one of the things that happened with that young rotation this past season was, and then Martin Perez's injury was, they were shuffling in guys out of the starting rotation. They were having to rely on their bullpen a lot more, that type of stuff. So again, that's why I keep advocating starting pitching. I think is their biggest need, and they need to add 2 starting pitchers. Now, are they going to add it through free agency? And if so, it's probably going to be the bargain bin. And that's why it's like, can you at least shop in the bargain bin rack, not the salvage rack, or even the very, very cheap, discounted, like bargain bin, maybe, that $7 to $10 million range, not the $3 to $5 million range. Because again, you're usually getting a guy with potential arm troubles. Don't get me wrong, Wade Miley, he's been around. And if the White Sox brought him in, he's always been good when he's available, but he's hardly ever available. And Martin Perez, I'm not going to be like, hey, let's not bring him back. I mean, I think he was a very good veteran leader. You're just not going to pay him that $10 million option. But at the same point, you're going to take the risk that maybe he's not available. Why not just spend a little bit more for a little bit more quality and a little bit more peace of mind that you got a really good chance of a guy making it through the entire season. And then, I mean, is it possible that they use the Rule 5 draft again to, get an addition to the rotation? Possibly. I wouldn't be banking that you're going to get a Shane Smith type impact guy, but maybe you get a 5th starter or again, a long reliever. But they've got to add some pitching. That's just what I think they need to do. And maybe we could ask Pope Leo the 14th, because they're always asking this guy a lot about his fandom, and he gets questions about it all the time, it seems like, when you check out social media. So let's discuss the sports questions. It would actually be great to start hearing the Pope get asked, while he's walking through the crowds and that stuff. And let's discuss it after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than Fandom, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, Fandom has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. And it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money, or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. So, for example, you think Luka is going to win the MVP this year. He has at plus 500. So even throwing, say, $10 on that gives you a chance to turn that into $50 if he does win the MVP. Milwaukee is putting a lot on Giannis's plate, so maybe he takes home the MVP too. He's at plus 1,300 the last time I checked. So $10 on that possibly happening will pay out $130. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Excuse me one moment. Sorry about that. Had to clear my throat. Hope you guys have a fun weekend planned. Again, mine is going to be pretty low key. I have to put together a TV table for my in-laws. And actually, I don't mind putting together furniture as long as it's not IKEA. I mean, because IKEA, I mean, that stuff, the tools, and even then, I enjoy it. Like, it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. So I'm one of those weird guys that actually enjoys putting together furniture. Well, shout out to my guy Jack Silverstein for being the inspiration behind this segment. When he tweeted this out, this is at Read Jack, and I think everybody should be following Jack Silverstein. If we're going to keep hurling Chicago sports questions at the Pope, I need us to pick it up. Like, Your Holiness, were you Rex or Orton? Be honest. What was your first reaction to the white flag trade? How long did it take you to forgive Hugh Hollins? May he rest in peace. And this is in response to the tweet going around when somebody asked, what's your favorite NBA team? And the Pope said, the Chicago Bulls. And I think, we're seeing it pretty much, at least in sports world. I think like almost every day, there's something when it comes to Pope Leo and sports, because it seems like anybody that goes to Rome or wherever he's touring around is asking him about it because, he's the first American Pope and he's from Chicago. He's Pope Bob. And, the White Sox have definitely celebrated it. There's where he sat in game 1 of the 2005 World Series, all that stuff. So I was wondering, if I had the chance to just shout out a question to the Pope, what would it be? What would yours be? Put some in the comments. But for me, I definitely want to know, who was your favorite White Sox player? Was it Paul Konerko? Was it AJ Pierzynski? Is it somebody else now? Was it somebody from back in the day? That type of stuff. What do you think about Jerry Reinsdorf right now? Are you hopeful Justin Ishbia is going to eventually own the team? And what can he do? What was your reaction when the White Sox won the 2005 World Series? Like, what was your celebration? How much did you jump in the air? Who are you with? That type of stuff. And I'm tackling this because it seems like his sports fandom, again, it pops up at least once a day in social media. And actually, I love it. It's great. And the only thing, though, that I find very interesting is how Cubs fans are still trying to claim him, even though it has already been debunked he was a Cubs fan. His brother came out saying, we're White Sox fans. And I think the latest claim to the Pope is, well, he was his mom was a Cubs fan, so we can claim him. No, you can't, Northsiders. You can't. You can grow up in a divided fandom house and it still stand. Like, I don't claim to be a Cubs fan, even though my grandpa was a Cubs fan. And I watched Cubs games with him because that was how we bonded over baseball. But he watched White Sox games with me. He never was like, go Sox. It was our thing. So, quit trying to claim him. Now, I would love for the White Sox to be good enough to where we can see the Pope cheering for the South Side rather than him answering questions. And it would be great to see him, give them props rather than telling a Cubs fan, when that yelled, hey, Pope, go Cubs. And he says, hey, they lost, that type of stuff. You'd rather him say like, hey, go White Sox. That would be amazing because they're good enough for that. And that type of stuff. But getting back to sports questions, ask the Pope, I would ask him, does it bother you that someone asks you about sports at least once a day? That type of stuff. Because, other popes, like John Paul II, I remember he was a big sports guy, obviously soccer. So maybe we just didn't know about it. And obviously we didn't have social media. But this is the first time you've got like a pope that figuratively, hey, he's from Chicago. He's got to like all the teams, obviously. Would you want to ask him, hey, Mark Burley, Hall of Famer? Or even for, general other Chicago sports questions. Which side were you on? Phil Jackson or Jerry Krause? Michael Jordan, greatest player of all time or greatest player of all time? What was the, favorite moment from the 90s Bulls? Your favorite player from the 90s Bulls outside of Michael Jordan? Because I'm sorry, I will die on the hill. Everybody's favorite player was probably Michael Jordan. Obviously, we all love Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen too. Those types of things. So I know I might get smoted for kind of playing around here, but I think the Pope has a sense of humor and, has a great sense of being a sports fan, that type of stuff. I want to be like, hey, what were your thoughts about when Ditka was fired? That type of stuff. Because that was a sad day too. And the Bears have known nothing but, mediocrity ever since then. That type of stuff. Yeah. That. What's your thoughts on Ryan Poles? Caleb Williams, will he be the franchise quarterback? So people have got to ask that. And that's the other thing. Like, have we actually confirmed that he is a Bears fan? We're assuming, but we want to make sure. Those are the things that we need to know about. Asking him what his favorite basketball team is. Okay, we've got it. White Sox. Now we need him to answer the question, are you a Bears fan? That type of stuff. I would ask him too, like, were you sad when Harold Baines was traded? And I just always ask that because as a 6-year-old, that was my first ever taste of heartbreak, that type of stuff. Were you happy in 2016 that your Cubs fans' friends got to see their team win the World Series? Because at least the only thing that I can ever say is it was nice for my Cubs fans' friends and family to see the, Cubs win the World Series, that type of stuff. I mean, at least everybody's not in agony anymore, that type of stuff. Do you think the White Sox will ever win the World Series? That type of stuff. I mean, let's get those questions out on there. So I agree with Jack. Let's start to evolve the questions that are shouted at the Pope when it comes to a sports fandom. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until World Series champion is crowned, which is either tonight or tomorrow. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back on Monday with a Minor League Monday report going over how the White Sox prospects did in the Arizona Fall League in the previous week. Well, this week. You can leave comments about today's episode on the YouTube page. You can leave comments via email, lockdownwhitesox@gmail.com, or on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review at wherever you get your podcast. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel @LockedOnWhiteSox or wherever you get your audio-only podcasts. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And I will talk to you Monday.